Welcome, everybody, to the Moment of Suspension podcast. I am Rebecca Jarzonbeck, aka Dr. Beck, your host. I have my first remote digital interview today with Dr. Leslie Hewitt, which is a huge honor to have on here. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be with you, Dr. Beck.
I am excited to have you. Dr. Leslie and I have quite the history together. I think we're going on 10 years. So yeah. This is a very significant interview for me and you because we started off my last year of chiropractic school. You were one of my female mentors. I spent time in your office up in the Bay Area of California, and you rocked my world. Like, you planted seeds that honestly probably haven't come to full fruition until the last few years, and definitely now the flower is blooming, I would like to think. And what those things were are actually a lot of what you and I are going to talk about today, and some of what this podcast, Moment of Suspension, was inspired from. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think that you recognized some of that in me. The concepts of performance overdrive and the gap and things that you and I are going to talk about today. But going back to that was 2016, 10 years ago. I spent time in your office, and I came from a background of being a young woman that needed to kind of figure everything out. I didn't have a super stable family life. And so with that, in chiropractic, I was gravitating towards what we call high volume, right? Which is, and not to be disrespectful to the chiropractic history and a lot of the way that a lot of us practice, but some of that is a male-driven model. And you saw it written all over me, but I didn't know it. And you were like, okay, yeah, because I had already had a job planned out. And anyways, you had practiced that way, which is, for those that aren't familiar with that, and that can be in any industry, is it's, moving fast-paced. You see a lot of patients. It isn't that you don't give good care, but it's one way of practicing. And you had already been through that in your life, and you had transitioned your practice into what you could describe it yourself, but a little bit more of a sustainable female model. And it was not appealing to me at the time. I loved you and I loved your practice, but I just still was on my path, right? and so I did that. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are now. Is you probably are like, okay, go do that. In your head, you're like, she'll figure it out, right? And I did. And I am figuring it out. So I started, that was in human chiropractic, and we know that I'm also an animal chiropractor. That ended up becoming my specialty in the business that I built. But that initial year or two in school, which honestly did help build Dr. Beck, I learned so many great things as well. But I also learned that some of the things I didn't want to do. But what's interesting is, fast forward, I carried some of that into the business I built, which was, I'll figure it out when I figure it out. I'm just going to start seeing horse patients and more and more and more. And again, and that's part of where this podcast was inspired, because I got to a point where I couldn't possibly see any more horses. And I hadn't really explored what that looked like beyond that. And so it started showing up in other parts of my life. It started showing up in riding my horse, wasn't going well, jumping, moment of suspension. And it started showing up in relationships. It was clearly showing up in my business. And so what we call performance overdrive was that place I was living in. And I had actually lived most of my life there. And then moving into the gap was where it all got dismantled, where I wanted to burn it all down. And so today I want to talk about all these things with you, but also the concept that we don't need to burn it down and what that looks like before we burn it down. So Dr. Leslie Hewitt, has quite the resume. She was the president of the California Chiropractic Association. She has run her own chiropractic businesses. She is now moving into other spaces for the Dr. Leslie Hewitt brand. So I'll pass it off to you, Leslie, as well, and you can fill in any of those gaps that I missed on your resume.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And just to go back, I spoke at the chiropractic college that Dr. Beck was going to, Life Chiropractic College West, and she approached me, which that was the best part of me being on the campus that day. She said, "Hey, can I come and work with you?" And I got to say, I was so impressed with you And if I can just say, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is you can share your story with no victim. And even just now introducing yourself, your upbringing, your relationships, your chiropractic practice, it's a journey. That's the whole point of this podcast and this conversation is it's a journey. And my experience of working with you is I really quickly saw who you were. You're a grinder, you're a hard worker, you have a lot of purpose and passion, you're spiritual, you're kind, and you get stuff done. So when you came into my practice, I knew that it wasn't exactly what you wanted, but I also knew that if I took you into what Beck and I call juicy,
crazy juicy,
crazy juicy women's events. And what's really cool is I took Dr. Beck to some crazy juicy San Francisco Bay Area, Berkeley, Marin County. There's some crazy juicy events happening in that area.
I was so uncomfortable.
I know. And it's really cool when you get a bunch of women into a room with no men around. And I'm not knocking the men. Like some guys have said, I don't like men. I actually love men. But I also know from doing a lot of events that women speak differently. It's kind of like you men in the locker room. You men speak differently when there's no women around. We speak differently also. So when I first met Beck, I quickly realized that I needed to take her into an environment where the conversation was much different than what she was familiar with, because she had a very masculine style, as do I. And thank God for that. It's structure, system, sequence, numbers, getting the job done. And in chiropractic and other businesses, that can translate to having a very busy, high volume practice. I transitioned out of all that and realized that that was the sweet spot. So I also transitioned out of practice, which is where I'm at now. I've been out of practice for 7 years. And I have to say, this is really incredibly a new space for me, because I'm reevaluating who I am and my identity. And so if I can just circle back around to what you're doing now, Dr. Beck, she's using her horse jumping and her horse chiropractic analogies, which I love, like the point of suspension. Think about being a horse jumper. You're in the saddle. You've trained and trained and trained with your horse, and now you're going to go jump. And while you're jumping, that is the point of suspension. There's no turning back. There's no making any corrections. You've done all your training. Now you have to trust the point of suspension. And I love how you use that as an analogy. And I think that my experience of transitioning is there is always going to be that point of suspension, which is a place, and we're going to call it the gap, right?
Yep. Yeah.
There's a place called the gap where you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're transitioning identities, you're in the point of suspension where you're out of the saddle, you're mid-jump, you haven't landed yet, and there's no guarantees how that land is going to happen. All you can do at that point is trust that you're in the gap and you've trained and trained and trained, and you are going to land. So I'd be curious to hear you, Dr. Beck, share about that experience for you. And I got to say, the horse jumping is brilliant to use.
I'm glad you like it.
I love it.
I know not everybody rides horses, obviously, but my hope is that it is a universal enough of an analogy that other people will be able to relate to it. I mean, even in like driving fast cars, and like being aggressive about sports and, things I love, the masculine side of me, there's always suspension involved. So horses just happen to be my specialty. So You know what's interesting about moment of suspension is, yeah, it obviously comes from that feeling of riding horses. And what's interesting, the more this podcast unfolds, is that most stories that involve something significant that's happened in someone's life involved a moment of suspension, like you said. And it is once you're midair, we can use the horse's jump, for instance, that also required suspension to get there. Because even like when you're on course, I've talked about power, what that feels like to power up a horse, which is the finesse and skill of riding, that it's not just the hands or the legs or your seat, it's all of it. And when you feel what that feels like to create lightness as well, moment of suspension almost is like an addictive feeling. And so you can go so many places with this conversation of that term, because it's also something we chase in life, of things we like to do, things that make us feel good. But there also is those stories where I'll use just even starting my business as one of those first examples. When I think back to it, how significant that was. I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. I didn't come from money. I just believed in myself. And when I think back to that, it was actually insane. So I left that first associateship position in Vancouver, Washington, which I'm super grateful for that experience. And then I remember I had gotten my certification in animals, and I had started to test, working on animals outside of the clinic. And I say this because I don't hide it. I think it's funny. It was part of the reason why I ended up having to leave that job, because there was a conflict of interest, because I was seeing horses outside of the clinic and then the riders wanted to be adjusted. Anyways, so I had proven to myself that I had actually helped run one of these doctors' clinic, and it was starting to be in the green. It was doing better, and I was fresh out of school. And so that did give me confidence. That's why I'm grateful for the experiences I had up there. But also I started to gain confidence because I was seeing that I could get animal clients too, like outside of that clinic. And so I remember when I left that job and I moved down to San Diego, again, on a whim. I came here because my sister was here and it just felt good. And that whole piece of intuition too that you and I very much talk about, a lot of people don't talk about, that it was subconscious at the time, and now I'm more consciously aware of how I move when I'm actually in my flow and get out of the way, that I think when we're younger sometimes we're better at, right? And then you start to get in your head. But I remember I told myself I was going to give myself 90 days to be able to pay my bills. I had saved up a little nugget during that first year of practice as an associate, and I was like, I'm going to give myself 90 days to build this business, this horse business in San Diego. And if I can't pay my bills after 90 days, then I'll go get another associateship. You know why I built it? Well, I never had to. But when I think back to that, though, and that was like 9 years ago at this point, that is a moment of suspension, because I fully had to leave the ground. I had kind of a backup plan, but really, I didn't really give myself the backup plan. It's like once I was midair, it was like that, it was game over. Like, right? I saw where I was going to land, and I just kept going. So I would say that is one of the most significant moment of suspension when it comes to my chiropractic career. And then that has begun, to be threaded in other areas of my life, and even in just smaller decisions, day to day, where you, it requires trust. It requires you letting go. And also to get to that point, it requires internal work, which we can talk about in the gap as well. Just as a preface, the performance overdrive is interesting because I would describe it as this kind of place of having a hard shell. So you think you're operating at peak, and you get results. So you just keep operating that way, which is a season of grinding and moving fast and making quick decisions, which will eventually lead to some form of burnout, whether you're a man or a woman. And then the gap is what that kind of triggers. The gap is how I describe it, but I'd love to know your opinion and thoughts of that. Is there's a trigger usually that happens that causes you to realize that you're requiring an identity upgrade, that thing you don't want to operate the same way that you were. In fact, it's necessary to be able to move on to the next level of what you're doing. Staying in performance overdrive, unfortunately, is not going to get you there.
Yeah. And so you brought something up for me that I've been really paying attention to. And I've been talking a lot also about signal versus noise. Signal being what's important, the conversation in the room, people, places, and situations that show up, and what's meaningful and important. Noise is all the distractions, and we all have distractions. So what you're describing and what you went through, so I would say symptoms are signal. And what I have noticed, burnout is kind of like end stage signal.
Definitely. It was already there, right? You just weren't paying attention. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about signal versus noise in regards to this conversation. The body is constantly whispering. And my experience is I've got some thinking going on up here, and I can intellectualize, I can process, I can sequence. I'm a systems person. I can come up with methods. Meanwhile, my body is screaming, right? At first it whispers, but burnout is a scream. That's signal. And so I discovered when I was in practice, there was a lot of signals. I was doing a lot of stuff. And when I got out of practice, what I realized is that put me into my gap. And I have transitioned, I'm older than you. We won't mention any numbers, but I have transitioned a lot in life. And this last transition for me really got to the heart and soul of my identity. And I really had to, I'll say this, I had a coming to Jesus moment in my own life where I was thinking, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What's next? What's important? What sort of message do I want to bring to humanity? And for me, a job is not just a job. A lot of people are like, why don't you just retire? I can't retire. So if there's any message I could get out in this podcast is I don't even know if the old-fashioned retirement even exists. It might for some people, but I know for a lot of us purpose-driven people, it's not retirement. It's just another gap. It's another opportunity. And what's really important to me, it's a guiding word, is spaciousness. So I'm not grinding anymore. And it took me a long time. My identity is no longer attached to productivity, which, I was a grinder big time. I could burn out circles around people.
Right, literally burn out.
Literally burn out circles around people because I was doing donuts. And boy, was I good at doing donuts. I could do donuts around people because I wasn't listening to the signals. I wasn't listening to the symptoms and the messages that were coming to me. And what I realized is I need to turn off cortisol, adrenaline, my identity, and I just need to sit back and think about what's really, really important in my life and what do I want to bring to the table next. And the other thing I was sharing with Dr. Beck before we went live is this is a really interesting concept. When you're in the gap, there is a level of feeling fraudulent. And I don't mean like you're doing fraudulent things, but what I mean is, just if I could share a couple of analogies, the brain surgeon has to do his first brain surgery. The chiropractor has to do his or her first neck adjustment. Everybody's got to do the first thing. And that first thing is, on some level, you're just testing the waters. So there is a level of fraudulence. So I have got much, much better in doing things from a place of intuition, trusting the signals in my body, trusting if my body is in the flow. The other thing that I use to really determine if this is the right direction for me Simple is sustainable. And what I realized my whole younger life, I did a lot of complicated things because I thought that's just what you did. You went into complication and you tried to dismantle it and you tried to figure it out. And I don't do that anymore. If I go into any business opportunity and it feels complicated or confusing, I don't do it. It's got to be simple. It's got to be in the flow. Spaciousness is really important to me. I believe in sequence. There's a natural order to things. And so I'm really getting better at just doing the next step and trusting that the next step will show up. And I'm just not putting the cart before the horse anymore. So that's just the whole like gap, moment of suspension, grinding. It's all come to where I'm at right now. So I love Brené Brown, and she wrote a book called Dare to Lead. You don't even need to read the book. Just the title is enough.
There's a great quote in there. Yeah.
Dare to Lead. And so she did a 12-year thesis on vulnerability. And it was the one thing in my grinding identity. I was afraid to show vulnerability. And you mentioned like we get this sort of like armor of like kind of like we're warrior chicks or something. I don't know why we had to do that.
Right.
But when I read Brené Brown said vulnerability is the number one trait to leadership. So I'm going to read a quote by her.
Yeah.
Transitions require vulnerability. Stepping into the unknown takes courage. Now, the next person I love is Byron Katie. We have to question the beliefs that tell us it's too late. So I'm an older woman, so I'm going to speak to the older women here. It's never too late. It's never too late. And Byron Katie has 4 questions, and I love all 4 of them. When you have self-talk, the first question is it true? So get underneath, is it true? Then the second question, is it true? Get under it. Then the third question, is it true? Fourth question, is it true? So I've been getting under, when I hear my self-talk, I've been getting under. Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And I'm getting to like core truths for myself. And then the other person, Marianne Williamson, says stepping into purpose requires owning our power. And this is, I'll end on this, and I would love to hear your comments, is when I get, is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And I get to the baseline, the truth is I am an empowered woman and I can do whatever I want. I'm calling in God, Jesus, my guides. I mean, whatever you call in for support, I am getting much better at trusting the signal, trusting my intuition, and really questioning when I have negative self-talk, is it true? So I'd be curious how you would respond to all that.
I love that, and I agree with it. And the thing that came to my mind, especially with the gap, is that you do feel exposed, and that is required for you to step into that leadership position, for you to those beginning steps of where you're going, which the next episode of this series will be called The Surrender. Because in order for you to get there, like you said, you have to take the armor off. And Performance Overdrive, you are armored up, and there's a time and a place for that. And like you said, it gets you far until it doesn't. And then the warrior woman, you've got to take the armor off, and that's where the gap is. And it can feel very uncomfortable, some for more than others. And to take the armor off, be exposed, be vulnerable, so that also people have access to you. Because if you're just so hard, it's like, how are you supposed to help lead others? Which I do believe for all of us, we will become some form of leader, whether that's in your family, whether that's in a career, whether that's for your community and other friends and things like that. So, and that's really where you begin to make a splash in the world and do good, because I think that's why we're all here, right? So, and then on top of that, when you can tap into what we call in chiropractic innate, for us, it's God and Jesus and, the spiritual side of this, that's where you truly then can step into your power. But if you've got your grip on all control and you've got your armor on, there is just no possible way that God's going to be able to work through you, how you and I interpret this, to be able to step into what you're calling an assignment is, which is going to change in life. Like you said, you've been through different seasons in chiropractic, you practice different ways. Now you're not currently practicing, you moved, but using all of those tools to now step into the new Dr. Leslie, which I'd like to just touch on that too. If you could tell the audience what you're working on with your brand, because you and I are both, I'm younger than you. I'm working on the Dr. Beck brand as well. I'm still in practice, but I want to touch on that and give you a plug here. Can you tell everybody about the Dr. Leslie brand and where that's going?
So as I've gotten older myself, what I'm realizing is getting older seems to be a mystery. And a lot of people are seeking medications, vaccinations, surgeries. Now they're using AI tools. They're getting on all the different AI to get their health care. Talk about noise. And, I started with signal versus noise. We have a lot of noise out there. And although we're all embracing AI, there's a lot of noise in AI. So the Dr. Leslie brand is really all about focusing on signal. I would really like to see a lot more holistic, healthy ideas in mainstream media for women and men and children and families, because people are, especially in the United States and Canada and Australia, people are going to the medical model for answers, and all they're getting is drugs and surgery. So the Dr. Leslie brand, in a nutshell, is looking at longevity and lifestyle. And I have focused on the blue zones to see, why are people living over 100 years old in the blue zones, yet here I am in Florida, where when I look around, we have more seniors and aging people in Florida than I have ever seen anywhere in my life. And yet this is not a blue zone. By the way, I'm wearing blue today to represent the blue zones, because there's a lot of wisdom coming out of those blue zones. And for those of you that don't know what the blue zones are, go ahead and Google. There's 5 places on the planet where people are living over 100 years. Why? How? How are they doing it? So I'm bringing that research and that evidence to the Dr. Leslie longevity method. And I will be sharing simple, holistic, daily activities. Something as simple as gentle movement, multi-generational relationships. There's a lot of other traits that I'll be sharing with my longevity method. And it's really lifestyle habits and choices that you can plug in so easily that you won't have to change anything except for some of those behaviors that are holding you back.
Awesome. And that's very in alignment with the Dr. Beck brand and this Moment of Suspension podcast is, sustainability. And today we're talking about a lot of I would say maybe the mental and spiritual aspect of health. But we both come from the chiropractic space. And so we are definitely in agreement a lot with healthcare and helping others live a healthy, happy, holistic life. So thank you so much for coming on here today. I had a lot of fun. I hope that the audience enjoys this conversation.
Let's do it again. Let's go dig in and share some of the crazy juicy that you and I.
Yes, there's
which
definitely.
I gotta say, When Dr. Beck and I get together, which she's coming back here next month and we're going to hang out, when her and I get together, we get into hours of crazy, juicy conversations and we leave no stone unturned. We get into some pretty heavy duty stuff, right?
Deep conversations. Everybody needs a friend like Dr. Leslie. I'm so grateful for you. She's trying to get me to move to Florida. I started adjusting some horses over there. So Wellington and Ocala are definitely the other place to build a horse practice. So we shall see. West Palm Beach definitely is calling Dr. Beck's name a little bit. I'll just put a little plug for me. I'm single, guys. Any good single men out there, either in Florida or here in San Diego, come on my podcast. But yeah, we'll definitely do this again. And for the listeners, you can look forward to more interviews coming that will thread through this framework and series that we're working through with Moment of Suspension. The next solo episode with myself will be called The Surrender, which is after you leave the gap, which is what Leslie and I spent a lot of time talking about today. So I can't wait till next time. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you soon.
Be bold.
Bye.